The music world mourns tonight because George Harrison, age 58, has died. The man often called the reluctant Beatle died among friends and family in Los Angeles after a long battle with cancer. Paul McCartney called his former bandmate his baby brother, and a lovely guy and a very brave man. Harrison grew up in Liverpool, where he fell in love with rock and roll, learned the guitar, and joined a group called the Quarrymen, later to be known as the Beatles. His songwriting contribution to the band included Here Comes the Sun and something which Frank Sinatra once called the greatest love song ever written. His post-Beatles life included a successful solo career. He was the first of the band members to have a solo #1 hit. He also found success as a film producer, as well as with another band he formed, the Traveling Wilburys. Joining me tonight to look back at the work and the legacy of George Harrison, Bill Flanagan, the editorial director for VH1, and Anthony D. Curtis, a contributing editor at Rolling Stone. Let's start with this notion that what it is about the Beatles that makes us somehow so connected to their lives, and therefore when they die, it is like we have lost something very, very special.
We've lost someone in the family. Isn't that amazing? I've heard so many people say that today. I think it has something to do with the fact that they came into our lives at a moment of national trauma, what turned out to be a real turning point, the winter after the assassination of JFK. And then the fact that even though they came in as sort of children's heroes, really, when you think about it, I mean, they were sort of replacing Roy Rogers and Superman, they immediately started growing up with the whole generation, sort of the big brothers who led the way, who were, in a funny way, almost mutants. They showed us what we were all going to become, and what looked so shocking in 1964, what looked really shocking when you sort of got into the crazy hippie drug days, eventually became the world we all live in.
Yeah.
The other thing I think to keep in mind is that, you know, with each passing decade, the Beatles have won over succeeding generations of listeners. You know, there was, every decade has seen a resurgence of interest in the band. So consequently...
Why is that?
Well, you know, it might just
really
be about the music. You know, strangely enough, you know, we can sit here and overinterpret it. You know, we'd have a lot of fun doing so. But I think that's it. You know, the songs are great, and you know, to bring our subject back, I mean, Harrison had a big role in that. I mean, he's one of those guitar players that was a little bit overlooked by fans, but not by musicians. You know, he was very influential and very admired, and came up with a different sound for each of those songs, and that's part, that specialness, that uniqueness, that distinctiveness is part of what makes those songs, you know, hold up.
Talk about his distinctiveness as a member of this sort of group that's so often and so frequently thought of as being whole. While diverse and different, they were the Beatles, and they'll always primarily be identified that way.
Well, I think the interesting thing about Harrison is that there was an aspect of him that I think many people could identify with. Like, he referred to himself as the Dark Horse. That was the name of his label, it was the name of one of his solo albums. And, you know, who wouldn't be intimidated to be in a band with John Lennon and Paul McCartney, you know? But I think everybody understands that struggle, but the degree to which Harrison developed his own voice as a songwriter, developed his own style as a guitar player, came to the fore as an important figure as a solo artist, I think people took inspiration from that. And when you know, add to that the kind of spiritual uplift that his life and work represented, it gave a lot of inspiration to people.
His legacy is what?
Oh, I think his legacy is, in some ways, I think he would have thought, and one of the things he was most proud of, was that he helped introduce a lot of ideas into the mainstream of Western culture. Yoga and Eastern thought and meditation. That was very important. And
the first thought I have of George Harrison, apart from the Beatles, is Ravi Shankar.
Ravi Shankar.
Absolutely.
That's my first thought.
And he said just recently that, you know, people take a lot of things for granted, that you can go down the street in New York and see a yoga center, an Indian restaurant, all these things. He said that didn't exist before.
Exactly.
And of course also, he really did bring made rock put its money where its mouth was in terms of social conscience. The concert for Bangladesh, as many people have pointed out, was the beginning of Live Aid and Amnesty International and all those things. He was the first guy to stand up and say, I'm not just going to sing about it, I'm going to try and get involved politically and economically in these causes.
He wrote how many songs?
Oh, gee, I don't know, all in. I
Hard to
mean,
know.
he had a couple on each
hundreds,
Beatles album, and then he
yeah.
had
Then
about, about 12 or 15 solo albums.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah, so he wrote
He had a couple
good
of hundred
stack
songs.
of songs, yeah.
Yeah. And his film producing career?
Was actually quite interesting. You know, I mean, people talk about George Harrison as if he was this hermit sitting in his garden,
right.
but, you know, he was running a film company, making very, very interesting movies. I mean, beginning with Life of Brian, the Monty Python movie.
I think he made Mona Lisa, didn't
And
he?
Mona Lisa,
really
Whitnell
Whitnell and I,
yeah.
really good stuff. And that's another thing people, Steve Soderbergh, the director, said in a conversation with Richard Lester, that he was always astonished at the fact that George Harrison was a fantastic actor. Didn't care to do anything with it. But it's true, if you go back and look at Hard Day's Night, where the other three are kind of mugging and playing a cartoon version of the Beatles, George is really nailing the lines. And he was interested in film. He was great friends with Peter Sellers, great pals with Monty Python, and as Anthony said, was a producer of Monty Python. You know, had that whole other side of him, that sort of really funny, dark sense, out of the corner of the mouth sense of humor.
And the, you know, handmade films in many ways was what Apple kind of set out to be. It became a home for like small, independent, interesting movies that other people wouldn't pick up, that he took and made a success. You know, the Beatles had hoped to do that kind of thing with Apple, and then everybody, after 2 months, got bored with it, and that was the end of that.
Didn't want to go to meetings anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
What was he like? You interviewed him.
Yes.
What was he like in person?
Well, for me, personally, it was just kind of overwhelming to be around him, because partly because he was so mysterious. You know, he wasn't out there all the time, and just to you know, it was one of the first times, and certainly one of the most powerful times, where, you know, I was talking with him, and each time he would start talking, my mind would flood with so many memories of the kind of impact he had made on me, that he would be quiet, and I'd suddenly notice the room was silent. I would say to myself, say something, ask him something. Yeah. You know, it was pretty overwhelming. He had a, I mean, in a very laid back way, because there was certainly nothing that was, you know, rambunctious or boisterous about him. But, you know, he had a kind of, well, a quiet power, you know, a kind of dignity.
What impact did he have on you?
Well, I mean, the Beatles, just, I mean, that was it for me, you know. When I was a kid, when I was 12 years old, that was the end of that, you know. That's why I do the work I do. Yeah, it was everything.
That's why you do the work you do?
Oh, absolutely.
You write about rock and roll because of the Beatles?
Oh, without question.
That's the only reason that there's such a thing as writing about rock and roll. You know, it just wasn't going to happen.
That's right.
With Jerry Lee Lewis. You know?
Dole.
Anthony is a PhD. I mean, you should be teaching school somewhere. You're the exact example.
So it was Harrison and the Beatles that led you astray.
Very much so. Very much so.
Or put you on the right path, one or the other.
I was happily corrupted.
Everybody who's in academia today is saying, why didn't I have George Harrison to change me?
Yeah, no, it was, you know, that was just, I mean, incalculable. I mean, they just meant everything. You know?
Sum him up in a word, in a sentence, in a phrase.
Spiritual. I would say that is really the core of who he was. You know, he really believed it. You know, he did not see death as an end. You know, on his first, post-Beatles solo record, he wrote a song called The Art of Dying, and he really believed that, you know, that was part of a natural cycle that you had to address. And I think that he wouldn't want people to be sad about this. I mean, he once said to me, you know, it's all the same mob going round and round and round as far as, you know, reincarnation was concerned, that people were on a journey through many lives to try to perfect themselves. And I think he would want people to think about that and, you know, enjoy his music and take the message from it.
Bill?
I think he was just a beautiful, beautiful character. I think we're lucky to have had him for as long as we did.
Thank you. George Harrison, remembered tonight throughout the world because of his contribution to music as a Beatle and beyond the Beatles. We leave you with a reminder of his work.